In today's Farm Report, farmers have a few things to keep in mind when they want to upgrade their lighting systems on their operations to high-efficiency models, which may help with cost savings and better working environments. Rod Bain with the U.S. Department of Agriculture has more.
So you run a farm or ranch and have been considering improving the lighting system of your operation to a high-efficiency model. What's the best way to go about this? As Daniel Chokas of Penn State University Extension notes,
our favorite answer here at the university is that it depends.
Or to elaborate on that thought,
lighting can sometimes seem very simple and straightforward, and sometimes it can become very, very complicated.
So maybe you just can look at the lumens per watt for your existing light source and what your replacement might generate, or just use daylight to save lighting cost. Or perhaps the layout of your operation requires complicated computer modeling. But Chokas says in any case,
come up with an estimate how much electricity is currently being used on the farm. Compare that to how much electricity we think will be used if a new lighting system is installed. The difference, of course, is going to be the savings for the farmer, and then we can compare that to the cost of installing it.
Support for installing a high-efficiency lighting system can come from a variety of sources.
Some of that comes from the installers and the technical salespeople from the different lighting companies. They can actually provide some really, really good support and advice. Also from local extension, they can also gain some more information and also maybe some referrals to other farmers who have done similar things in the area.
However, it is important to rely on support from sources with farm experience.
So people who aren't familiar with the farm environment and don't have a lot of experience putting in lighting systems in the farm environment, they often just don't appreciate how aggressive the environment is on the farm, and so they might try to recommend a light fixture that simply won't last for long.
Also consider lighting systems that will be easy to clean. Now, what if you are building a new structure on your farm or ranch? Chokas says too often, the lighting system is the last thing to be planned for and installed.
And as a result, if there are budget problems that occur during the construction project, the lighting system often suffers in terms of being downgraded to a lower quality system.
And speaking of budgets, since the bottom line is a producer's main concern, Chokas offers this advice.
There are several programs through USDA that help with the cost of lighting upgrades. And depending on where you're located, there could also be some incentives available from local utilities or rural electric co-ops to also help farmers install some of these more efficient systems.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. On the heels of the recent visit to Cuba, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack continues international travel this week with stops in Asia. His first destination starting Wednesday is Japan. And while there, he will talk about the importance of ag trade in revitalizing rural economies, noting the similarities between the two nations from a farm and trade perspective.
They're concerned about the economic opportunities in rural parts of Japan. They're concerned about the aging nature of their farming population. So it's an opportunity for me to sort of focus on the fact that I think there is a positive opportunity in agriculture generally throughout the world. Certainly with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's opportunity both for the U.S. and Japan to see expanded market opportunities.
The Secretary will also visit with Japanese government counterparts and business leaders before joining the U.S. delegation this weekend in Guangzhou at the annual meeting of the U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Thanksgiving is next week. How much do you really know about the Thanksgiving history? And there are a few things that we think we know that may not be true. USDA's Gary Crawford has more.
Yes, it's that time again, as Winnie the Pooh says.
Hooray, hooray, today is the day to give thanks for giving and give thanks away.
But of course, Pooh's friend Rabbit knows all about Thanksgiving, so please explain it to us.
You see, Thanksgiving is about tradition and custom, habit and routine, defined and refined over many long years. Oh, it's about grand dinners.
Yes, and it's also about that traditional Dallas football game, yes. And in fact, at that first so-called Thanksgiving in this country with the Pilgrims and Indians,
there were contests and races and other kinds of things. So in addition to the food, there was also a tradition of athletic events, I guess you could say, if you want to draw this together to the football tradition.
That's Ann Efland. She's an historical expert with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, I used to think I knew everything about Thanksgiving, just like Rabbit, until I met Ann. Now, most of us know that the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620.
And by 1621, they had a harvest to celebrate, but only because of the nearby Indians, the Wampanoags.
Now, that's fairly common knowledge, but I did not know and had often wondered how the Pilgrims and Indians had been able to communicate. Well, Ann says it turns out that, yes, you had the Indian tribe there,
Who happened to have a couple of tribe members who had been to England and knew English and befriended them.
a colossal coincidence that probably saved the Pilgrims from being wiped out that first winter. So you've got the Native Americans lending a vital helping hand to the Pilgrims.
So they were taught to plant corn and squash and pumpkins. So that first celebration, when they had been able to grow enough, they knew they would have enough for the winter, they invited the nearby Indians who had been so important to their planting to join in a celebration of the harvest.
However, at that first Thanksgiving, there's no direct evidence that they actually ate turkey at that celebration. One pilgrim did keep a journal that says
They had gone out to shoot wildfowl. So it's not absolutely certain that they had turkey, but they certainly might have.
One other misconception many of us have is that from that day on, we celebrated a yearly Thanksgiving Day in this country, and Ann Eflin says no, not at all. It was an on and off thing, mostly off, done at various times in different regions. And finally, some 200 years after that first celebration,
There had been a movement led by a woman, Sarah Josepha Hale, who was the editor of a popular ladies' magazine, who was leading a movement for a national holiday.
And finally, Mrs. Hale's 40-year campaign bore fruit, and Abraham Lincoln in 1863 declared the last Thursday in November as a National Thanksgiving Day, a celebration of home, hearth, and food. And of course, we later added football, of course. And for all of it, we are thankful. Right, Pooh?
Hooray, hooray, today.
In Washington, Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Thanks for Thanksgiving, it's Thanksgiving Day.
You may remember that last winter and spring, avian influenza brought in by migratory birds got into commercial poultry flocks.
We lost a lot of turkeys, approximately 9 to 10 million birds.
Now, you would think that that would cause a problem as far as supplies for this Thanksgiving, but Agriculture Department economist Dave Harvey says we're only talking about a 3% decline in turkey production for this year as a whole. And that's partly because we had a big supply already in cold storage when the year began, and producers sent 7% more turkeys to market in the first 3 months of this year than the same time the year before, partially making up for the cutbacks later on. Recently, at the wholesale level, frozen hen turkeys were selling for about 5.5% more than this time a year ago. But Dave Harvey says supermarkets are willing to offer deep discounts to us to get us into their stores to buy all the other stuff and stuffing for the big meal. For example,
In the Washington area, prices have gone as low as 59 cents a pound.
and in some places now, prices are lower than that. Some stores giving away turkeys with a minimum purchase. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.